Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went there? We all do that once in a while, but what if it starts happening more and more? What if you forget important things, like names, dates, or events? And worse, what if you keep forgetting that you already asked the same question 5 times today? See, most people think memory loss is just part of getting older. But here's the truth. It's not always harmless forgetfulness. Sometimes it's the very first alarm bell of something deeper, something that needs your attention right now. This might surprise you. The earliest and most common sign of dementia isn't dramatic. It's quiet, subtle. You may miss it completely unless you're really looking for it. It starts with forgetting recently learned information. Not something from 30 years ago, but something someone told you yesterday. You might forget appointments, important dates, or rely on sticky notes, reminders, or family members far more than you used to. And here's the kicker. The person experiencing it may not even realize it's happening. Often, it's the spouse, the son, the daughter who starts noticing. Dad keeps asking me when the dentist appointment is, even though I've already told him twice today. Sound familiar? Now let's clear something up. Forgetting where you parked your car once in a while? That's normal. Forgetting how you got to the parking lot in the first place? That's a problem. You see, the brain stores short-term and long-term memories in different ways. When dementia begins to take root, short-term memory is often the first to weaken. That's why someone with early dementia might tell you vivid stories from their teenage years, but forget what they had for breakfast. And what's dangerous is this. Memory loss in dementia isn't just about forgetting. It affects your safety. People may forget to turn off the stove, take medications, or lock the front door. That's not just memory loss. That's a risk to your life. Here's the bottom line. If you or someone you love is showing signs of memory loss that goes beyond the "where are my keys" stage, it's time to pay attention. Not panic, but pay attention. The earlier you catch it, the more options you have. There is support. There are ways to slow it down. And trust me, your future self will thank you for taking action now. Have you noticed that paying a bill, balancing a checkbook, or following a simple recipe seems harder than it used to be? Maybe a loved one used to breeze through puzzles, schedules, or taxes, but now, even a basic to-do list looks like it's written in a foreign language. Now here's the thing. Occasional mistakes happen to everyone. You mix up the grocery list or forget to write down your doctor's appointment. That's normal. But when the ability to plan, organize, or solve problems starts slipping away, something deeper might be going on. And it's one of the earliest, most overlooked signs of dementia. Let's break this down. You see, the brain's executive center, the part responsible for critical thinking and daily decision-making, is often affected early on in cognitive decline. This shows up as trouble with multi-step tasks, things like preparing a meal using a recipe, following directions on a medicine label, or managing a budget. Let me give you a scenario. Let's say your dad used to be the go-to person for family finances. He handled bills, taxes, investments, no problem. But now, he's making simple math mistakes. He forgets to pay the electric bill. He's confused by the online banking page. Suddenly, he insists that something is wrong with the bank. But really, something's wrong in the mind, not the money. Here's where it gets even more dangerous. Impaired problem solving isn't just about paperwork. It can show up in situations that require quick thinking, like what to do if the smoke alarm goes off, or how to respond if you get lost while driving. That delayed response, or worse, no response at all, could be the difference between safety and serious harm. And the person experiencing this, they often don't realize anything's changed. Or if they do, they'll brush it off. "I'm just tired," they say. Or, "I've never been good with computers." But deep down, they feel the shift, the confusion, the frustration, the growing fear that something isn't right. What's especially painful is when they start to lose confidence. They stop making decisions. They avoid things that used to be easy. The sparkle in their independence starts to dim. But here's what I want you to know. Noticing this early, before it becomes a crisis, is powerful. Because early recognition gives you a head start, a chance to consult a doctor, get evaluated, put support systems in place. Don't ignore it. Because when someone struggles to plan, organize, or solve problems, even the small stuff, it may be their brain's way of asking for help. And your attention could make all the difference. Imagine sitting down to make a cup of coffee, something you've done every morning for decades. But today, something's different. You fill the kettle, forget to turn it on, then walk away and never come back to it. You come back later and wonder, wait, did I already make it? That's not just forgetfulness. That's a signal. You see, when familiar tasks become unfamiliar, it's time to start paying attention, because dementia doesn't just affect memory, it interferes with routine, sequence, and muscle memory. And this can happen quietly, subtly, and long before anyone uses the word dementia. Let's get specific. These are the tasks we all do without thinking: making breakfast, setting the table, getting dressed, following the steps of using a microwave. For someone in the early stages of cognitive decline, these things can suddenly feel overwhelming. Steps get skipped, instructions get misread, half of the task gets done, and then abandoned. Here's an example that hits home for many families. You're driving to your daughter's house, a trip you've taken dozens, maybe hundreds of times, but suddenly you can't remember which exit to take. You turn down the wrong street and don't recognize where you are. Panic sets in. You pull over, not sure what to do next. That feeling of being lost in a familiar place is terrifying. That's not just distraction. That's not just age. That's the brain struggling to complete something it used to know by heart. It's the same with hobbies: baking, knitting, gardening. Someone who used to love crossword puzzles suddenly leaves them unfinished. The TV remote becomes confusing, the washing machine settings seem foreign, and when asked about it, they'll often shrug it off. "I'm just getting old," they'll say. But deep down, they know something's slipping, and they don't want to admit it, not to themselves, not to anyone. Here's the important part. This is not their fault. It's the brain sending distress signals. Dementia can interfere with the how of doing things, even when the what seems familiar. So what can you do? Start observing, gently, kindly. Look for patterns. Are they asking for help with things they never used to? Are they avoiding tasks they once enjoyed? Are they getting frustrated, flustered, or even angry when something seems more complicated than it should be? This isn't about jumping to conclusions. It's about being aware, because recognizing this sign early, before it leads to isolation, mistakes, or even accidents, can change the course of someone's life. With the right support, routines can be adapted, independence can be protected, and safety can be ensured. Have you ever looked at the clock and thought it was morning, only to realize it was already dinner time? That happens to all of us now and then, especially after a nap or a long flight. But for someone in the early stages of dementia, this confusion with time isn't occasional, it's persistent, it's disorienting, and sometimes it's downright frightening. Here's what I mean. One of the early warning signs of dementia is losing track of time, dates, or even where you are. A person may forget what day it is, what month. They might even struggle with the year. They may ask repeatedly, "Is it Tuesday today?" even after being told moments ago. But it goes deeper than that. In the early stages of cognitive decline, the brain has trouble processing the flow of time, understanding what's happened, what's happening, and what's supposed to happen next. Morning and night start to blur together. Seasons feel confusing. Someone might dress in a heavy coat during summer or wear shorts in the middle of winter because they simply don't feel the passage of time the way they used to. And this confusion isn't just about clocks or calendars, it's about orientation. Some people with early dementia will forget where they are or how they got there. They may be in their own neighborhood, even their own home. And suddenly it feels unfamiliar. They might say, "I don't know where I am," or worse. They won't say anything at all, but their behavior will tell you. They'll grow anxious, restless, or try to leave the house to go home, even though they're already there. This is one of the signs that breaks hearts and scares families the most, because if a person gets disoriented outside, during a walk, at the store, even while driving, they may not know how to get back, and they may not realize they're lost until it's too late. But here's something that's just as important as recognizing the sign: how you respond to it. If someone is experiencing confusion about time or place, it's critical to respond with calmness, reassurance, and patience. Arguing doesn't help. "You've lived here for 20 years. Doesn't bring them back. Instead, redirect gently. Offer familiar anchors, a favorite song, a cup of tea, an old photo. These things can ground someone when the world around them no longer feels solid. So ask yourself, do they keep asking what day it is? Do they seem lost in places that used to be familiar? Are they forgetting how they got somewhere? Or why? If these moments are starting to happen more often, don't ignore them. These aren't just senior moments. They're signals from the brain that it's struggling to stay connected to the rhythm of life. And the earlier you catch this, the better your chances of helping that person stay safe, stay supported, and stay grounded in both time and place. Now here's something most people don't expect. Dementia isn't just about memory. It can affect your vision too. And I'm not talking about blurry eyesight or cataracts. I'm talking about how the brain processes what your eyes are seeing. Let me explain. One of the lesser-known early signs of dementia is trouble with visual and spatial relationships. Things like judging distance, depth, contrast, or even recognizing what you're looking at. The eyes may be working fine, but the brain starts struggling to interpret the visual world correctly. So, how does this show up in real life? It can be as subtle as someone tripping over a rug they've walked across for years, because their brain no longer registers the change in depth, or spilling coffee when pouring, not because their hands are shaky, but because their brain misjudges where the cup is. You might see them hesitate at doorways, bump into furniture, or reach awkwardly when picking something up. And here's a big one: driving. This is often one of the first areas where visual spatial decline becomes dangerous. A person might have trouble judging the space between cars, reading road signs, or even recognizing familiar landmarks. The scariest part? They may not realize it. Another common sign is trouble reading, not because they can't see the letters, but because their brain struggles to follow the line, track from left to right, or focus on the content. Patterns might seem confusing, colors may blend together, even faces might start to look unfamiliar. And that's heartbreaking. Imagine looking at your spouse, the person you've loved for decades, and for a second your brain tells you, "I don't recognize them." That moment of panic, even if it passes quickly, can be deeply unsettling for both the person and the family. So how do you spot this early? Do they seem more clumsy lately? Are they hesitant on stairs? Have they started sitting closer to the TV? Do they struggle with reading, even though their eyesight's fine? These might not seem like much until you connect the dots. Here's the takeaway. If someone is seeing the world differently, moving through it more cautiously, or losing confidence in their coordination, it might not be their eyes, it might be their brain. And that's something that deserves gentle attention, not panic, but awareness. Because the earlier you spot this, the sooner you can adjust their environment for safety. Better lighting, contrasting colors on steps, removing trip hazards, simple changes that can protect their independence longer. Dementia doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, in missed steps, in misjudged distances, in a pair of eyes that still see but no longer understand. Have you ever had a word right on the tip of your tongue, but just couldn't grab it? That happens to everyone. It's normal. But when finding the right words becomes a constant struggle, or when speech starts to feel confusing or disjointed, It could be something far more serious. This is another early sign of dementia that most people miss: sudden problems with speaking or writing. Now, I'm not talking about grammar mistakes or forgetting how to spell a tricky word. I'm talking about real difficulties, like losing the thread of a sentence halfway through, repeating the same story multiple times in one conversation, or calling objects by the wrong name. Imagine pointing at a wristwatch and calling it a hand clock, or asking someone to pass the fork stick. The person struggling often knows something's wrong. They feel the frustration rising. They pause longer between words. They gesture more, hoping you'll fill in the blanks. They may even laugh it off. But behind the smile, there's anxiety. They're wondering, why can't I get this out? It's not just talking either. You might notice changes in writing, handwriting that's suddenly messy, uneven, or missing entire words, notes or lists that don't make sense. Or they may stop writing altogether, saying it's too much trouble. And here's what's really telling: they may withdraw from conversations completely. They go quiet in group settings. They stop picking up the phone. Why? Because trying to communicate becomes exhausting, embarrassing, even scary. Let me ask you this: have you noticed someone close to you starting to hesitate more when they talk? Are they struggling to keep up with fast-paced conversations? Do they repeat things without realizing it? Are their texts or notes starting to look different? These are signs that should never be brushed aside, because what's happening here isn't just about speech. It's about brain connectivity. The regions responsible for language, memory, and comprehension are all tightly linked. When dementia begins to affect those pathways, the brain can't retrieve or organize words the way it used to. And yet, the person is still in there, still thinking, still feeling, still trying. That's why patience is so important. Rushing them won't help. Correcting every word only adds stress. Instead, let them take their time. Ask questions gently. Offer help if they want it. But most of all, don't stop listening, because nothing makes a person feel more invisible than being talked over or talked around. If someone you care about is showing these signs, don't ignore them. Don't tell yourself they're just tired or they're getting older. These changes in communication could be the brain waving a red flag, a quiet plea for attention, for help. And the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you can give them what they truly need. We've all misplaced our keys. We've all spent 5 minutes turning the house upside down looking for the remote, only to find it in the fridge or the laundry basket. That's life. That's normal. But when it happens frequently, in strange places, and with no recollection of how it got there, that's not just being forgetful. That's your brain throwing up a red flag. This is one of the classic, yet quiet early signs of dementia: misplacing objects and being unable to retrace steps to find them. Let me paint the picture. Your mom always kept her purse on the hook near the door. She's done it that way for 20 years. But lately, you're finding it in the oven or tucked inside the bathroom cabinet. And when you ask her about it, she insists someone else moved it. She doesn't remember putting it there at all. That confusion, followed by defensiveness or suspicion, is very common. People with early dementia may begin to accuse others of stealing, hiding, or moving things. Not out of malice, but because their brain genuinely cannot track the memory of where the item went. It's terrifying for them, and frustrating for everyone around them. See, in a healthy brain, when we misplace something, we can usually backtrack. I came home, put the groceries down, then I took the mail. That ability to retrace mental steps is what helps us reconnect the dots. But when those mental breadcrumbs disappear, when the sequence gets jumbled, the object stays lost. And so does the confidence that comes with routine. It's more than just misplaced objects. It's a disconnection from process, memory, and logic. So what should you look for? Are they losing things more often than before? Are the lost items turning up in odd locations, drawers, the freezer, under the bed? Do they get unusually angry or paranoid when they can't find something? These aren't just quirks. These are signs. And here's the really hard part. The person may start to doubt themselves. They stop trusting their own memory. They begin to feel embarrassed, even ashamed. They may become quiet, withdrawn, afraid to admit when something's gone missing. So this is where you come in, not to judge, not to lecture, but to support. Offer to help them create habits, designated spots for keys, phones, wallets. Use labels, use baskets, keep it simple, and always, always speak with empathy. Because this isn't about being careless, it's about a brain that's struggling silently and needs kindness more than anything else. If you notice these signs, don't ignore them. Don't excuse them away. These are the small things that add up, and they often point to a bigger truth. And the sooner you recognize it, the sooner you can help protect not just their belongings, but their dignity, safety, and sense of control. What if I told you that one of the earliest signs of cognitive decline might show up not in memory, but in money? That's right. One of the first places dementia often reveals itself is in judgment, especially around finances, decision-making, and everyday choices. It can start small, but the consequences, they can be big. Here's what it might look like. Your father, who used to be cautious with spending, suddenly gives away hundreds of dollars to a stranger over the phone. He insists it's for a charity or a prize he won. Or maybe your mom starts buying odd things online, multiple sets of the same item or products she clearly doesn't need. At first you think, well, maybe they just made a mistake. But it happens again and again. And each time the reasoning makes less sense. This is poor judgment, and it's a hallmark of early dementia. You see, judgment is how we make decisions, how we weigh risk, how we know what's appropriate. And when the parts of the brain that control those decisions start to falter, people may act impulsively, recklessly, or even dangerously, without realizing it. It's not just about money. They may wear heavy coats in the middle of summer. They might eat spoiled food, or forget they've already eaten. They might let strangers into the house, give out personal information, or leave the stove on after cooking. And here's the tough part. When you try to talk to them about it, they may not see the problem. In fact, they might get defensive, irritated, or insist you're overreacting. Because from their perspective, their judgment still feels normal. But you'll start to notice they aren't reading social cues the way they used to. They may interrupt conversations in strange ways, say things that are inappropriate, take unnecessary risks. Even things like neglecting hygiene, wearing dirty clothes, or refusing to shower can be linked to this loss of judgment. And while these changes might seem behavioral, they're neurological. This is the brain misfiring on the basic mechanics of good decision-making. So what can you do? Start by observing. Don't confront or shame. Instead, look for patterns. Are they falling for scams or making impulsive purchases? Are they skipping bills or making risky choices? Are they ignoring basic health and safety habits? These moments, though difficult, can be powerful signals, and catching them early, when your loved one still has the ability to understand and engage, is critical. Because this isn't just about stopping one bad decision, it's about protecting independence, preserving dignity, creating systems that support them without taking away their voice. If you see these signs, don't wait for a crisis. Talk to their doctor, look into cognitive assessments, take action while there's still time to put supports in place. Because good judgment may fade quietly, but your attention to it can make all the difference between danger and safety. Have you noticed someone pulling away from the world? Maybe they used to light up the room at family gatherings. They never missed a card game, a book club, or a Sunday phone call. But lately, they're quiet, absent, making excuses, saying, "I'm just tired," or "I don't feel like talking." And while that might sound like depression, and sometimes it is, it can also be something else. One of the early signs of dementia is withdrawal from social activities, hobbies, or conversations. And not because the person suddenly dislikes those things, but because they've become overwhelming. You see, when the brain starts struggling to follow conversations, remember names, or stay mentally organized in group settings, the simplest social interaction can feel exhausting, embarrassing, even scary. Imagine being in a room where people are talking, laughing, and sharing stories, and you're lost. The words start blurring together. You forget what you were going to say. You nod politely, but you're not really following. So, what do? You stop answering calls. You turn down invitations. You isolate. Most people wait too long. They dismiss the early signs. They make excuses. It's just stress. He's tired. Mom's just getting older. But the difference between forgetfulness and cognitive decline, it's in the pattern. It's in the progression. And catching it early doesn't just give you peace of mind. It gives you options. So, what should you do? Step 1. Write it down. Start keeping track of the changes you're noticing. Be specific. Dates, behaviors, moments that felt off. When you talk to a doctor, this journal will be gold. It's the evidence that turns vague concern into something that can be evaluated, tested, and understood. Step 2. Make an appointment. Reach out to their primary care physician. Don't say, "I think it's dementia." Just say, "I've noticed some changes in memory, in behavior, in thinking, and I'd like to get it checked." Many clinics can perform simple cognitive assessments right away. Others may refer you to a neurologist or memory specialist. Step 3. Involve someone you trust. This isn't a journey you take alone. If you're the one experiencing these symptoms, talk to someone, a family member, a close friend. If you're the one noticing the signs in someone else, approach with care. Be gentle. Be honest. Say something like, "I've noticed you've been forgetting a few things lately, and I care about you. I want to make sure everything's okay." And here's the most important thing to remember. This is not the end. A diagnosis, or even just a concern, doesn't mean it's over. In fact, it could be the beginning of a better, more supported chapter. With early intervention, lifestyle changes, and medical care, many people live well for years after the first signs appear. There are support groups, memory care resources, therapies, and medications that can help. And most importantly, there is still time to plan, to adapt, and to live meaningfully. So if this video resonated with you, don't sit in silence. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever seen any of these signs in someone you know, or even in yourself. If not, type 0 point either way. You're part of a conversation that matters. And please, if this video opened your eyes, even a little, share it. With your family, with your community. Because someone out there right now is seeing these signs and has no idea what they mean. You could be the reason they get help early. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more videos that talk about the things people are too afraid to say. And turn on notifications so you never miss a truth that could change, or even save a life. You're not alone. You're not helpless. And it's not too late. Let's keep walking through this together.